Welcome to Computing at Home with Digital Schoolhouse. My name is Estelle, otherwise known as ComSci Geek. I'm a computing teacher and also develop resources for the programme. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Elle Osili-Wood. Elle, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hello, I'm Elle Osili-Wood. I'm a video game TV presenter and journalist. So I work with people like the BBC and PlayStation to make lots of videos about games. It is, in fact, my dream job. So I also work with BAFTA, presenting lots of their video game content. So they've asked me to come in today because one of the areas they're really keen to work on this year is sustainability in gaming. So we don't have, a lot of pushes about being green in games. And we had our first big one last year. So we've decided to come together today, put on this Eco Gamer workshop, and we're going to have a lot of fun, but also learn a little bit about how we can be a bit more sustainable in games.
Excellent, thank you, Elle. If you haven't taken part in a Digital Schoolhouse workshop before, we specialise in delivering computing workshops that are accessible, educational and fun. As Elle said, today you're watching our Eco Gamer workshop. This workshop is unplugged, meaning you don't need any tech to take part, just a device to watch the video on. You can watch any of our previously streamed workshops on our YouTube channel. Just search YouTube for Digital Schoolhouse. To all learners watching, remember you can pause the video at any time to take notes, collect your thoughts, or take part in the workshop alongside us. The Digital Schoolhouse team are ready and waiting in the chat should you have any questions throughout, and Elle and I will be taking 5 minutes to answer your questions at the end of the workshop. Parents and guardians, you might want to watch the next bit as it explains how to access our resources, but after that feel free to join in or sit nearby to supervise if you want to. So I'm going to just go through where to find our resources and also the resources that you're going to need for this workshop. So the first thing that you're going to need is some coloured pencils or pens and a copy of our worksheets, or if you don't have access to a printer, if you grab yourself just a notepad or some paper, that's absolutely fine. The resources, the worksheets, I'm just going to show you where to find them on our website now. So if you bear with me a moment while I jump over to show you where to find those. So you'll need to head onto our Digital Schoolhouse website, which is digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. And you will need to go to the website and then go to resources, and then click on live workshops. If you scroll down the page, you'll find the section that's called Eco Gamer. If you click on the Eco Gamer link at the top, that will take you to the main workshop page. So if you're interested in running this as a lesson when you're back at school, or if you're a teacher watching and you're interested in doing that, that's where you'll find all the resources for running this for your own session if you want to. And then the public files at the bottom are the ones that you're going to be needing, and you'll need a copy of the worksheets, which is DSH Eco Gamer workshop worksheets. You'll also need a copy, or at least to be able to access the Hootsuite social media strategy workbook, which is at the bottom, and the Sega Football Manager 20 sustainable packaging information sheet as well. Myself and Elle are going to go through that with you a little bit as well, so do be if you don't want to access them, that's fine. We are going to go through those today. And also Elle in a moment is going to talk you through the previous unplugged activity for this particular workshop, which was to create your own version of the Football Manager packaging for a new game called Planet Simulator, but I'll let Elle talk you through that. But if you haven't actually done that activity, the files for that are on the same page. The unplugged activity and the cardboard game case net template are both on there, should you need to do that before taking part in today's workshop. So that's pretty much where you'll find everything. I'm going to just jump back over onto the camera so Elle can talk you through the resources that we've done before. So as I said, you'll need to have created your eco-friendly packaging for Planet Simulator before having a go at today's workshop, and I'll just show you the one that I've had a go at doing just here. But don't worry if you haven't done that yet, Elle is going to talk you through and do a quick recap of what you needed to do.
Thanks. So obviously, you've just seen where you can go and get the resources. So that's where you need to start off, because you're going to need, there's a template that you can use that's literally designed to the same spec as the packaging we're going to be exploring today. So you need to download that. So it's going to be able to cut it out and fold it into the shape of your very own packaging. And so what you're doing is creating your own packaging for a new game called Planet Simulator. So this is a game that lets you make different decisions. You're going to be in control of an Earth. You do get to feel godlike, and you get to make decisions and see how they affect the Earth. So it's kind of showing you a little bit about the things we need to consider in our daily lives to see how we're having an effect on climate change, how we're having an effect on how greenery grows, things like that. So that's kind of the theme you're thinking of when you design your packaging. So be as creative as you like, or maybe you're a minimalist and you want to go very simple, but either way, you're creating the most eye-catching packaging you can. This is going to be on shelves. This is what people are going to see when they buy your version of Planet Simulator. And that's what we'll be creating a social media campaign from today. So you want to make sure you have that before you start today's project.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elle, for reminding us of that. If you're interested in seeing the packaging that this was all based around, the Football Manager packaging, I've actually got a copy of it here, which is the finished packaging which went out to stores. So as you can see, it looks really nice, and it's not losing anything in terms of how the quality of the packaging for it being a more eco-friendly, sustainable version of the packaging. So that is what it was based on, to just give you an idea of what it looks like when it's all finished and nicely printed, and die cut as well. So it's actually not cut up with scissors, it's all cut by a machine as well. So that's what it looks like when it's all finished. So without further ado, let's start today's workshop, and I'm going to talk through a little bit about what we're going to be doing today, and exactly what you're going to be covering, and what our objectives are really for today. So I'm just going to pull up the presentation and I'll talk you through that now. Okay, so this is Eco Gamer, and our tagline for today is Play for the Planet. In this workshop you will learn about brand identity, carbon footprint, considerations needed when designing environmentally friendly packaging. We're going to be looking at audience and purpose when designing a social media campaign, and we'll also be looking at how to create a social media campaign for a specific platform. So your challenge is, following the success of Football Manager 2020's environmentally friendly packaging, Sega would like you to design a social media campaign that will raise awareness of how packaging can be designed to be more planet friendly, based around the limited edition packaging that you designed for their new game, Planet Simulator. And of course, Planet Simulator is a fictional game that we've created for the purpose of this workshop. Planet Simulator will be released across all platforms in two formats. The first will be using the standard game packaging endorsed by the console manufacturers, and the second will be a smaller run that uses environmentally friendly packaging, which is where your packaging comes in. So the first thing we're going to look at is brand identity, and brand identity is the collection of all elements that a company creates to portray the right image to its consumer. So if we look at Football Manager's brand identity, you can see they have a logo, which is really very recognisable if you have any knowledge of the Football Manager brand. They have a tagline, which is "Your Club, Your Way," and they have a colour scheme, which is sort of purple, turquoisey colour, and then a yellow that they use throughout their packaging. So your first task is to have a good read of the game design document that Sega sent you about Planet Simulator, and I'll read that through to you if you haven't got a copy of that. And then you're going to have a go at using the first worksheet to design a brand identity for the game. If you don't have a copy of the worksheet, what you're doing is coming up with your own logo, tagline and colour scheme for your version of Planet Simulator. And I'll just show you what the blank sheet looks like so that you can see that on the camera, just in case you don't have access to the worksheet yourself. So this is what it will look like if you're using the worksheets. So you're going to come up with a logo, a tagline and a colour scheme for your game. So that is what we're going to be doing to start with. And while you're having a go at that, Elle and I will have a quick discussion about some ideas that we had for this particular worksheet, and I'll have a go at filling it in on the visualizer for you as well, and I'll show you some of the ideas that we've come up with. So I'm just going to hop back over onto the camera. There we go. So Elle, did you have any ideas for what sort of colours might work well for this particular promotion, this kind of the game idea?
It's obviously green. which feels really obvious, doesn't it? It feels obvious to quite literally go green.
Yeah.
But, you know, that is kind of, you know, a thought behind the packaging being recyclable, the game itself having quite a green message. And then the kind of cover I designed was a planet with a cursor on it.
Nice.
As if you were kind of clicking on planet Earth, and lots of blues as well, because it was set in space, and so it's kind of blues and greens, and I think that, you know, for me that was a color scheme I really liked, because it feels quite neutral. You can do a lot with it. It doesn't have too much, it sounds terrible to say, personality to it, but sometimes you have to think about, you know, whether people associate colors with different things, and how they'll feel when they see that color. You know, often when people see red, it makes them feel nervous, or it makes you feel like it's a warning, whereas blue is supposedly, you know, a very calming color. You're meant to feel quite nice about it. So those are the kind of colors I was thinking about.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. That's pretty much exactly the same colours I've gone for. So if I show you here's one I made earlier. I was looking forward to saying that. This is my packaging that I put together for the Planet Simulator packaging, and you can see it's quite similar to what Elle was just discussing. So I've got the globe. I didn't go for a cursor. That's a really good idea. I wish I had done that now. And it says Planet Simulator, and then it's in green, and then I've got the blue as well, obviously for the water. And you can see I've got a tagline on mine, which is "Play for the Planet," which is the same tagline as we've been using in the workshop today. So that's you'll see that's what I've got in my design. So I'm not sitting here texting on my phone, by the way. I'm hastily filling in my worksheet so you can see it at home as well. So my game tagline, as I said, is "Play for the Planet," and my colour scheme. Sorry. I can't write and talk at the same time. I can do it a little bit, and then I get so far, and like it's obviously too taxing for my brain. It gets a bit overloaded. And then my colour scheme,
you know, this is why the Blue Peter presenters get the big bucks, because they've mastered the talking and the writing and the sticking at the same time.
Yeah, so here you go. I'll pop this back on the visualizer so that people at home can see what I've just done. So I've got my Planet Simulator logo, I've got my tagline, which is "Play for the Planet," and then my colour scheme, which is this sort of, I've got almost like a purpley blue and a lovely green colour for the sort of representing the Earth. And then there are some extra boxes on this sheet, so if you did want to add some extra elements to your brand identity for your game, you can do. So things like you might have a particular font that you want to use, and when we talk about font, we're talking about the style of writing. So I don't know if you've noticed, but when you create a document, you can change the font and you can actually look at what the name of that font is. So you could put that in one of those boxes. You could also include other elements such as images that you might want to have throughout your design, or even the logo for you might want to have a fictional logo for your game studio as well, maybe. So you could add that onto the sheet if you wanted to. So there's a few things that you can add if you feel that you want to add more to your brand identity. So that's the brand identity sheet. So let's have a look at what we're going to be looking at next. So having come up with our brand identity, we are going to start to think about the packaging we used, and starting to think about how we could promote this a little bit further. So the limited edition packaging that you've designed for Planet Simulator is based around the net designed for Football Manager 2020, as we discussed earlier. And you can see on your screen now, this is the actual net design that Sega created. And you might notice that you can't see all of the information on the sheet which you can see in the actual net design that you used. That's because that's kind of used as an overlay. It sits on top so that everything can be positioned in the right position, then it's taken away when it's printed, because you wouldn't really want to have the word front printed on the front of the packaging. It might look a little bit silly. So that's why you can't actually see it on this design, but it would have been there when they were designing it, and then just taken away when it was ready to go to the printers. And packaging blanks are often made from nets, and a net is a designed 2D shape or pattern that can be folded into a 3D object. So when I talk about a net, that's what I'm talking about, and it might be something that you've come across in your DT lessons previously. Right, so your next task is to use your completed packaging design for Planet Simulator to create a social media campaign. This should show how Sega has reduced the carbon footprint of its packaging for Planet Simulator with a view to encouraging other companies to use more eco-friendly packaging and also raise general awareness about climate change issues by highlighting things that we can do in our everyday life. So I'm just going to jump back in with Elle and we're going to talk you through the actual Football Manager packaging, because we've got quite a lot of information about this packaging that I think would be really useful to include in your social media campaign. So Elle, if you are able to take back over. Yeah.
They thought through every element. The presentation is up and that we're kind of on the first page for that.
Yes.
So the Football Manager presentation.
Yeah, I've got that open. Yeah.
So obviously football. Fantastic. So as we said, Football Manager is a really popular game. It's a game that lots and lots of people know. It's a classic title. It comes out every single year. Everyone's very excited every single year. If you haven't played it, it's a game that you will completely lose yourself in. It's absolutely brilliant. And so if we have a look at the second page, we can see that there's been lots and lots of different versions of this game. And every year they have a big physical release. So until recently, it used to be that more people bought an actual physical copy of this. They went to a shop and picked up a copy rather than downloading it. But for the first time, that started to switch around. And that's something we're seeing in the games industry, that more people like to download their games than actually buy them and have to faff around with a disc.
Yeah.
So on the next page, so this meant that what they had to think about was, with the rest of the sales that they had happening in shops and the rest of the physical sales, how can they minimize their impact on the environment? Because something a lot of people don't think about is the fact that all video game casing up till now has used plastic. And as we know, plastic is terrible for the environment. It doesn't degrade. It sticks around for a very, very long time. And it just builds up and builds up and builds up. So some of the things they were thinking about were their carbon footprint, which is how much carbon you create whilst you're, how much carbon dioxide you create whilst you're creating your product, how much the production affects the environment, the sustainability, so how long the plastic's going to last, whether it's recyclable, and if they're creating any pollutants, so if they're polluting the air or the environment or the ground that the plastic goes into. So next up, you can see some of the Football Manager designs. You can also see that it had a little bit of a rebrand. So they went for a new logo. It's a bit more simple. It's a bit cleaner. That's something we're seeing in design lately, particularly with games, is people like it to be a little bit more minimal, a little bit cleaner. And so they decided to also go for a new look at the same time as their new packaging, which is a really great thing to do when you're making big decisions. You may as well go all in and change everything at once. Yeah. So on the next.
Yeah, I'm just going to say this is called, I think these cases are called Amaray. That's the actual sort of type of case that they're using for the packaging. And they're extensively used throughout the whole games industry. And not just games, it's also the film industry as well.
Absolutely. So on the next page, we can actually see one of these cases, and this is what they kind of looked like. So they were plastic cases. I'm sure you've seen them. As you said, you get your DVDs in them, you get your games in them. They're plastic cases. They have a disc inside. They often come with a little paper manual, a little paper booklet that tells you about the game. They have a paper inlay, which is what the cover's called. So the actual image of the game that slides into the top, that's the paper inlay. And then they were wrapped in plastic as well. So often you have to kind of rip off that really tight shrink wrapped plastic. So that's a second layer of plastic on your plastic case. So this is what cases looked like before they made their big kind of technical innovation and came up with some new packaging. So the next page shows us the questions that they had to consider when they decided they didn't want this to be plastic or quite so much plastic anymore. So first of all, it was, do we need a plastic case and tray? So they needed to also think about what retailers needed. So when you are selling a game and you're selling the physical copy of it, it also matters what shops need from you. So little things like, what are their shelves like? How are they going to prop the games up? What do they want the games to look like? What do shops think is going to, actually entice people to buy your game. Because as I was saying earlier, you know, when people walk in and they see your game on the shelf, are people still going to want to buy it? So when they asked, would it look premium? That means, does it still look like a game that's got good value? Do you feel like you're getting a quality game if the packaging is different to everybody else's packaging? They also needed to think about whether it would be robust enough, whether it would be secure enough. So that means, you know, they wanted to figure out whether or not we were using plastic casing because it's so strong. So, you know, unless you step on it, which I have done before, but unless you step on it, you know, it tends to be pretty strong, pretty robust. You know, your disc is safe in there. And similarly, it's very secure. So once it's been wrapped in that secondary layer of plastic, that means shops don't need to worry about somebody just sneaking in and opening the case and stealing the disc. So they needed to consider that if they changed the packaging, particularly to cardboard, would it still be strong enough to not make sure the disc wouldn't be damaged, and would it still be, you know, safe enough that shops would feel like they weren't going to have their stock stolen? And then they were interested in using recycled materials. So that's, you know, something that has been used before and then turned into this packaging. And then would it continue to be recyclable? So once you'd made this new packaging, would you be able to recycle it when you were finished it with it, when next year's edition came out and you didn't need, you know, the last one anymore? Can you then throw that away and it can be recycled? It can, you know, or whether it's going to just hang around in the way that plastic does. So on the next page, you can quickly see how that kind of is considered, the route that that takes. So it goes through a feedback process. So they talk to people, they go and talk to the people who could possibly make their packaging, their suppliers. They get some samples, try them out. They think about them, feel them, show them to the shops, people like that. And then they get feedback again to decide on the best way forward with this new packaging.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. This sort of feedback. This kind of feedback loops used throughout computing, really. So even if you're like designing a program or a game or anything like that, you will go through that process of testing, feedback, and then using that feedback to take you back into like trying new ideas out, redesigning, and that loop is used sort of throughout lots of processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that's vital because you might think you have a brilliant idea, but it's always helpful to just run it by somebody. And, you know, as Estelle said, that is something that happens a lot in computing. So again, we've got another, on the next page, another quick look back at what the old packaging was like, just so you can remember just how much plastic was involved in that packaging. And then if we move forward, we can see the new Digipack. So this is the new packaging. And as you can see, it already looks very, very different. So first of all, it's made of 100% recycled and recyclable card. So that's already completely different. We didn't have recyclable materials before. So then what we have is a shrink wrap. So as we mentioned before, it needs to be wrapped for safety. It needs to be wrapped to make sure the only person who gets their hands on the disc is you, the person who bought it. And so what they used is a special type of shrink wrap that is widely recyclable. So that means that, you know, when you unwrap that, you can throw it in the bin and know that most times your recycling bin, and know that, you know, most places will be able to recycle that. So the printing itself on the card, this was using water and vegetable inks. So those are kind of less pollutant. So you might not realize actually some inks pollute the environment. And so they made sure to specifically use inks that don't pollute. So these are water, vegetable inks. They're completely natural. They're made of natural materials. And so they don't damage the environment when this packaging is thrown away. So the disc is also recyclable, which is something that's very, very different, but it's not widely recyclable. So this is something that's a little more difficult to do, and an area they've had to put a little bit more effort into. So you can recycle this, but you probably need to take it to a specialist site or send it to one of the companies that can accept discs and recycle them for you. But if, you know, as we all should be putting in a little bit more effort, you can also recycle the disc when you pick up next year's edition. And the same thing with the manual as the packaging, that is also made of recycled material and it is recyclable. So you can see that there has been a huge change in this packaging. This was really monumental, something that in the games industry, we'd never really seen before. We'd never seen, you know, pretty much every single element have, you know, so much care about the effect it was going to have on the environment. So on the next slide, we can see that obviously, as I said, it was such a big deal that, you know, Miles Jacobson, who's a studio director at Sports Interactive, who make the game, they, you know, they put a letter up on the website and they said, you know, we're not bragging. This isn't a letter to say how great we are. It's a letter to invite you to join us. And so he explained how they'd done everything they did, all the work that they put into it. They made that open for everybody. You know, they didn't want to hide this kind of innovation away. They don't want to be the only people doing it so that they get praise for it. What they want is the industry to adopt this as a new standard. They want everybody to make packaging that is just as recyclable, just as good for the environment as theirs is. And so they made an open letter. They said, let's talk about this as an industry. Let's discuss that we use so much plastic, and we'll make our research, our planning, our packaging available for you. Any company that wants to use it, you can also use it to make your packaging, which I think is really great. And as you can see on the next slide, it generated lots and lots and lots of headlines, lots of people talking about it. As we said, this hadn't really happened in the games industry before. You know, we haven't really seen such a big effort to make things sustainable. So we had lots and lots of coverage for that, particularly because, you know, it was kind of a challenge for the industry, was kind of, you know, saying to other people, let's see if you can do it as well. So as we can see, so on the next slide, we've got essentially the main points of what went out, the main things that they are also kind of challenging other people to do. So 100% recycled packaging, being more environmentally friendly, replacing, you know, the big thing is to replace that plastic games box. They also changed the dimensions on this. So part of what they were doing was trying to reduce their carbon footprint, which we'll see a little bit later on, but that includes changing how they transport these games. And so there was a little bit of a change to dimensions. And then the fact that it's not only recycled materials, but that it's recyclable, because that's important. You want to make sure that when people are done with it, they can recycle it as well. It's not just you know, taking advantage of that.
Definitely.
So we can see, yeah, exactly. And on the next slide, we can see, you know, just how effective this was. So they've got some of the kind of big changes that they saw. So, you know, it saved 20 tons of plastic. It meant that less fuel was needed to transport these because they were lighter. They used fewer pollutants, so they were, you know, the things they used were much less damaging to the environment. It's in cents, I believe that's euros,
Yes.
but it was much cheaper. It was sorry, not cheaper. It was much cheaper to make the plastic versions, and so, but it was only a tiny bit more expensive to make these versions. So it's actually, you know, in terms of what you might think, the amount of work they had to put into it, you might think, oh, it's going to be hugely expensive. It's actually not that much cheaper to make the damaging versions. So you may as well put the effort into to make the version that is best for our planet. And then largely they raised awareness. So as I said, you know, they wrote this open letter. They asked other games companies to join them. And so it wasn't just about what they were doing. It was about the fact that they started this big conversation in the industry. They got lots of social media coverage, lots of news coverage. And so it's meant that other games companies have had to think about what they're doing. So if we have a look, we can kind of quickly go through some of the changes that we've seen. So as we said, they wanted to get their carbon footprint down, and you can see that it went from 191 grams CO2 to 91. So that's obviously, you know, a huge change there. On the next slide, we can also see that the carbon footprint of making a copy of Football Manager is equivalent to making 3 tablespoons of porridge. So, you know, it's really absolutely minuscule. You know, when you think about the effort you would put into that, you know, and you can see that it's a really helpful way to visualize just how much they've lowered that impact. You know, what the kind of thing it's comparable to shows you that it's, you know, it's a really big change. And the next slide, we can see that actually the process of making all the games, it was so low, the carbon footprint was so low that it could be cancelled out by, I think, 14 people not eating meat for a year. That's right, the equivalent of their entire process. So, you know, that's to think that would cancel out their entire, you know, they could just get some people in the company to do it and cancel the whole thing out. But it's, you know, you can see again, using that comparison is really great to show you just how low they managed to get these numbers. It's really, you know, not many people think about games packaging, and it doesn't feel very exciting or very interesting. But when you start to delve into it and you see these really simple examples, it helps you understand that actually they've made a really big change in an area people weren't thinking about.
Definitely.
So again, on the next slide, you can see there's just a quick chart to show you the difference in the 2019 version and the 2020 version, and just how much they managed to lower kind of every aspect. So, you know, the materials, they managed to change how they distributed it. They managed to lower that as well. So it's, you know, they've made these really impactful changes in every element of how it works. They didn't just, make a cardboard case and say we're done with that. They've managed to look at every aspect of that packaging process, from making it to delivering it, and make big reductions in kind of every single element of it. And we can see that again in the next slide. So they were looking at their greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gases are obviously really damaging. They have a huge effect on our kind of safety cloud layer around the earth. That means that kind of damaging rays from the sun can get through and melt the ice caps. And so again here, we can see that they managed to make really big changes, and it shows you this kind of in context of the entire process. So you can see that some of it actually in the 2020 side looks bigger, but it's because it's against much smaller emissions for materials and that kind of thing. And the next slide, you can see again, that shows you kind of more closely looking at the materials because of the difference they made. We can see that the greenhouse gas emissions for plastic are really significant. That's the majority there of where we get those emissions from. And so when we look at the materials they've used in this new version, we can see just how much lower they are, just what a difference it makes just not to use plastic. And so then on the next slide, as I said, this wasn't just about their packaging. It wasn't just about this one game. It was about making a difference. So this was part of a larger initiative called Playing for the Planet. This was a big campaign. This has been taken to the UN, where they've made a pledge. Sports Interactive, Sega, alongside other companies, have made a pledge to reconsider how the games industry works, to look at all the different ways that we work, in our offices, the way we make games, the way we sell games, and find ways to make that more sustainable. So that's really exciting. We've seen good progress on it. We've seen lots of companies join in. So it's actually, really, really exciting. And on the final slide, as you can see, their next steps, which was to persuade every games company, film company, and music company to switch from plastic packaging to sustainable packaging. And so, as I've said, that is their big goal. That's kind of what we're doing here today. That's film companies with their DVD cases, games companies with their games cases, where they start to consider sustainable packaging, and kind of the fact that they would also want to share the news about that, do exactly what Football Manager did, and make a big noise about it, shout about it, and get other people involved. So that's the plan there, and that's the plan here today.
Definitely. So it's really amazing when you go through the details of just how much they managed to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, and also increase the recyclability of the packaging. I mean, it's mind-blowing that more companies haven't really taken this up, really, when you consider just how much of an impact it has. And obviously the more people that start using this packaging, the cheaper it becomes to manufacture it, because when you manufacture things in bulk, that's when it becomes cheaper. So yeah, so it's a no-brainer, really. So hopefully, raising awareness will really help other companies to consider it as a possibility. So let's have a look at the next activity. So having gone through in quite a lot of detail about the packaging that Sega created, thank you, Elle, for going through that. That was really fantastic. We're going to now come up with some, just basically thinking about these, sorry, my brain has gone a bit slow for a minute. So we're going to now start to think about the actual social media campaign of what we're going to be doing in terms of promoting our packaging. So this should show how Sega has reduced the carbon footprint of its packaging for Planet Simulator, with a view to encouraging other companies to use more eco-friendly packaging and raise general awareness about climate change issues by highlighting things we can do in our everyday lives. So if we have a look at the next worksheet, you'll see we've got a few questions to start thinking about our social media campaign. So the first question is, what do you want to achieve with social media? So that is really getting, the question is sort of, we want people to think about how using more eco-friendly packaging is a possibility, and that by doing it they're going to make a big change. So that's really the reason that we want to do this social media campaign. And then the second part of it is to think about developing your content strategy. So the questions we're going to ask for that are: what types of content do you want to post on each social network, and who the target audience is, and then how often you're going to post content, and how you'll promote it. So just a note before we think about those questions, we're not actually going to tell you to go and put this onto social media. This is very much about planning and thinking about how you would come up with a campaign for this, because obviously the different social media platforms have different age ratings, and you will need to make sure that you are an appropriate age to be able to use those platforms. So we're not suggesting that you actually go out and use the platforms, but just thinking about how you could design a campaign around them. So first question about what types of content do you want to post to each social network? Well, we're going to actually go into that in a lot of detail as we go into more of the workshop pack, but part of what we're going to be looking at is obviously we want to be posting images, and we want to post probably more images than text, because there's lots to show that when people see images, they're more likely to have a look and take that information in, rather than a great long post which they're perhaps not going to read in a lot of detail. Who is the target audience? Well, we've said we want to highlight it to other companies that they might adopt the more eco-friendly packaging. So other games companies is part of our target audience, but also we want to be promoting this as the option that we want people who are actually buying games to be like pushing for. So we actually want to be the target audience could equally be people who are going to be playing the game. And then finally, how often you will post content and how will you promote it? Well, we're probably going to be posting content daily to start with, because this is going to be promoting our new game, and then that will tail off as we get closer to the release date. And then obviously once the game's released, we're probably not going to be promoting it quite as much. So that's kind of the answers that you're going to be looking at on this sheet. So if we go back into the presentation and have a look at what we're doing next. So a little bit about what a social media campaign is. So it's coordinating marketing of a product or business across multiple social media platforms. And so we've actually done this already. We've done our strategy, and we've added as much detail as we can about the campaign that we plan to run. So we can start to think about what platforms we're going to use. So this is where we're going to look a little bit at the Hootsuite social media strategy workbook, and we're going to have a look at page 5 of that, and we're going to choose what platforms we feel are most appropriate for our campaign, and then fill in worksheet Unplugged 3 to explain why we've chosen those platforms. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up the information about the different platforms, and I'm just going to go through those with you at home. So you can pull this up yourself as well if you want to have a look at this in more detail. And if you don't have access to the worksheets, then obviously you can listen to me talk you through them. So let me just put there we go. So the platforms that Hootsuite go through are the most popular ones. So Elle, feel free to jump in if you do have anything that you want to add to this. So the main ones that we're going to look at obviously are Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube. And then there's a couple of extra ones on here that you might not have heard of, which is Foursquare. And also there's some information in this pack about Google+, which is another one that you might not have used previously. So Facebook has 1.28 billion users. It's slightly more predominantly female than male. 48% of users are aged between 18 and 34, with 31% aged between 35 and 54. And that's the largest of the social media networks, with the largest audience, and there's a large focus on interaction with friends and family. Twitter, which is another one that I'm sure you will have heard of, has 255 million users. It has 62% female, 38% male. Again, quite similar split across the demographic for male and female for Twitter as Facebook. 66% of users are aged between 15 and 34, so slightly higher of the younger end, which I find quite surprising actually. I always thought that Twitter was used by slightly older users, but actually that's not the case. It's an open network geared towards conversations via short messages. Then we've got LinkedIn, which is one that you may not have heard of. This is a network that's geared towards building professional connections to aid career development. They've got 300 million users, 39% female, 61% male. So this is one where we've got more male usership than female. And 60% of users are aged between 25 and 54, so an older age group. We've got Google+ with 1 billion users, 30% female, 70% male for the split. All users have their own Google accounts in order to access that network, and it's the social network arm of Google's product offering with heavy visual focus. And then we've got Pinterest with 70 million users, 83% female, so very female predominant, with 17% male, 45% of users between 35 and 54. Again, I'm quite surprised it's I again thought that perhaps would be a younger usership, but again, it's a little bit older than I thought it would be. It's a place to build virtual collections of visual content pertaining to personal interests. Then we've got Instagram with 300 million users, 68% female, 32% male, again, predominantly female. 90% of users are under 35, so a lot younger than the other social media platforms, and it's a platform for sharing visual content. We've got YouTube with 1 billion users. It reaches more US adults than any cable network. That's pretty amazing when you consider sort of how many adults there are in the US. The predominant user base is 18 to 34. It's a platform for hosting and sharing video content. And then we've got Foursquare, which is a social media network focused on geolocation-based interaction with 45 million users. Again, this split is slightly more majority male, so 60% male, 40% female, and 80% of users are between 18 and 43. So again, a slightly younger demographic on that one. So what your first activity is with this particular content is to decide which platforms you think would be most appropriate for your advertising of Planet Simulator and its eco-friendly packaging. Choose 3 platforms and then explain why you've chosen those platforms. So this is where you can use that information from Hootsuite to help you to identify which ones are the best for your promotion, and also why you've particularly chosen those ones. So I'm just going to jump back over to Elle and just see if she's got any ideas about which ones that she probably would go for her campaign.
I think probably Twitter is where I'd start. I think when we're looking at games marketing, that's where a lot of the conversation is. Lots of gamers use Twitter, so it's somewhere that's very easy and quick to reach people. You don't have to spend a lot of time creating kind of graphics or videos. That's additional, and hopefully you would, but it's a very direct way to reach people and to make sure that you're kind of where that gaming conversation is happening. So for me, that's always where I'd start. And then obviously I'm a presenter, so YouTube is another one that I'd be interested in, particularly I think when you're looking at something like this that has a really interesting backstory. A really interesting video would be to kind of follow the process of how it's made, go behind the scenes of the big factory where they're making the packaging, to show you the journey it takes, something like that. So I can already think of lots of videos that would be really interesting to watch about, in particular, the packaging the new packaging you're creating as part of this campaign.
I'm thinking that perhaps LinkedIn might be a good one to go for a third platform, just because with part of this campaign, it's the idea is to promote to other companies how it's possible to use more eco-friendly packaging. And I think that LinkedIn, because it has that more professional element to it, that might be a good place to sort of pick up that professional insight into the packaging as well. So perhaps LinkedIn might be a good idea as a third platform. So fill that information in, put the detail into your sheet. Fill the information into your sheet, and then once you're happy with the platforms that you've selected, we can then start to look at the next section of our workshop. So if you do need to pause the stream because you need to put a bit more detail in, then feel free to pause if you need to. As I said at the beginning, you can pause regularly if you do need a bit more time to fill the detail in. So you do need to think about making sure that you get the information right for what you're sharing. So Sega have provided you with lots of detailed analysis of how and why they came up with the design of their environmentally friendly packaging. Elle and I have already gone through this information really carefully for you, and you're going to need to use that to help inform your social media campaign. So if you need to go back and refer back to it to get some of the statistics correct, then feel free to do that, because what we're going to do next is we're going to work on the worksheet that's Unplugged for. And we're going to detail the information and content that we're going to include on each platform. And then remember when you're filling in this information, that some platforms have slightly different audiences, and your content might need to be different for those particular platforms. So Elle and I are going to have a little bit of a discussion about the 3 platforms that we've chosen and the kind of content that we might include on those. We've touched on it a little bit, but we'll probably go into a little bit more detail about some of the specifics that we might include from the Sega Football Manager pack that detailed all the information about how they made it more eco-friendly. So the 3 platforms that Elle and I have chosen are Twitter, we've chosen YouTube, and we've also chosen LinkedIn as the 3 that we would look at. So Elle, have you got any ideas about particular content that you would include? And perhaps you might want to sort of expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, so Twitter is a really kind of quick, fast-paced platform. You know, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets in a single user's timeline every day. So your content needs to be kind of short. You don't want to, you don't want to write the longest tweet you can. It's about being quick and snappy, but still catching attention. So something that's really great here is, using kind of shorter graphics, not kind of long videos, but maybe a quick snapshot of it popping into screen or something like that as an image attached, so that there's something to look at, because tweets with images perform a lot better. It means that it catches their eye, they stop to have a look. So when you're tweeting on behalf of a brand, when you're working on kind of a business social media account, you want to always be including some kind of image with it. And then just some kind of fun tweets. So something that we've seen today in the presentation we looked at earlier is that there are lots of really great stats with this. There's lots of really surprising facts and figures. So that could be something you could do. You could do a couple of days where you just tweet out a really surprising fact. There's also a really fun feature on Twitter, which is, I sound 100 years old, I'm like, a fun feature, but on Twitter you can do polls, and and I actually really like them because they're a good way to get people engaged without realizing that you've made them come and have a look at your content. And so what you could do is kind of get people to guess. So you could say, 1 copy of Football Manager, the carbon footprint is equal to, and then you could have something like, a couple of different options. So it could be, building a television, or 3 tablespoons of porridge, or cooking McDonald's for a week, something like that, and get people to pick and see which one, and then hopefully they'd be surprised every time, because the answers are quite surprising. So that's kind of a fun way to get people engaged on that platform, that you're just trying to catch people's attention for a minute or 2 on Twitter and just pop in their head for a moment. And then YouTube, somewhere where you kind of flesh that out, so people are coming to look for content. So for a game, you always want to get gameplay up, you want to have people kind of play through the game, but because of the theme of Planet Simulator, that's a really great way to get people playing it, put up some great gameplay videos that people are excited to see, because they always want to know what's coming from a game. But within that, whoever's presenting it, if it was me, I'd be slipping in little facts and figures here and there about the packaging. I'd be mentioning it at the beginning and the end of a stream, or at the beginning and the end of a video. So it's a really great way to, get people watching something they want to, get them sitting down, really paying attention to your product, and then making sure you just kind of mention the things that you want to in those videos. And as I said, it's another platform to kind of put really exciting content on, a bit more of a deep dive. So you might have put some fun facts and figures that were quite short on Twitter, and this is where you really expand on that. So you say, hey, we told you that really interesting piece of info there. This is where you can come and see behind the scenes. This is where you can come and see exactly how we do that. So it's a place to kind of grab people for a bit longer who are really that bit more interested. And then as you mentioned, I'll let you talk about LinkedIn, but I do think that's a really great idea, because that is somewhere people go to share their work achievements. And so this is something that is definitely a work achievement. It's a great place to go and say, hey, look what we did, we're throwing the challenge to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think perhaps with the polls on Twitter, you could almost do something where you use that to sort of get sort of the public opinion on would you still be interested in buying a game if it came in this kind of packaging versus traditional packaging, and they could almost use the results of that to feed into your campaign on LinkedIn, couldn't you? So it sort of then links it all together a little bit. So lots of ideas of how we would tackle different platforms and the kind of content we use. And I think you're quite right, the information like 14 people giving up meat for a year is the equivalent of the carbon footprint from the whole I can't think of the right word, the complete printing of the whole run of the Football Manager game. So little things like that would probably work quite well on Twitter, almost as a little challenge. You know, I only need 14 people to give up meat for the year, and then we're carbon neutral on this project, sort of thing. So maybe as a sort of little challenge to people that are reading your social media tweets and posts. So let's have a look at what we're going to do next. So we've looked at it, talked about the content that we would use. Now the next thing we're going to do is start to think about this in a bit more detail, specifically for the different platforms that we've used. So we're going to use the there's templates for each of the different platforms that we've talked through, and I'll show you those in a minute on the visualizer to talk through them in a bit more detail. You're going to choose the templates that are appropriate for the 3 platforms that you've chosen. You're going to then design the campaign that you intend to run across your 3 chosen platforms, and you'll need to read the relevant section to about getting started for those chosen platforms in the Hootsuite social media strategy workbook to help you plan your content. I'm not going to read those because it'll be here forever with me reading through the details, but if you're not completely sure about those platforms, that you maybe you've chosen LinkedIn or Google Plus, where it's a platform that you're not quite so familiar with, that information is there in the social media strategy workbook to help you plan your content if it's something that you've not really looked at before. So as I said earlier, the ones that Elle and I have chosen are going to be Twitter. So I'm just double checking that everything is still working as it should do. Yes, it is. So we've chosen Twitter, so we can get rid of Facebook, but you can see there's a template on one side of the sheet which shows you sort of the rough layout in terms of what is included in a standard post on that platform. So you've got the Facebook one, which we won't be using because I'm going to jump straight past that. We've got the Twitter one, which we are going to use. So you can see that we have a profile picture, and this is where you can go back to the very first worksheet that you did, where you came up with the logo and the tagline and the colour scheme, because these are the things that are going to feed into your post, because you want to have your brand presence to run through all of your social media campaigns, so that when people look at your post on whichever platform you happen to be posting on, they go, oh yeah, that's Planet Simulator, because they have become so familiar with the colour scheme and the logo and the tagline. A bit like with McDonald's. McDonald's is a really good example. You just see the colours and you think McDonald's straight away. So we want to be in the same kind of realm as that with our campaign. So we've got one for Twitter. There's the one for LinkedIn, so you can see the actual layout in terms of what the post looks like. It's quite similar to Facebook in some ways. You've got profile picture again, profile name, a bit of a description, which is a bit different to Facebook. So you could actually put a bit more detail in there. We want to try and keep the post fairly short and then have it more image based, so it's really eye catching to the people who are accessing and looking at your post on LinkedIn. And we're not going to use Instagram, but there's the one for Instagram. We have one for Google Plus, and again, that's a little bit different. So one thing that Google Plus uses is a little bit like Twitter. It uses hashtags, so you can see that they're included in the section for profile name. So that would be where you'd fill in the details if you're going to do one for Google Plus. So I've actually not done one for YouTube. I didn't make a template for that because YouTube's a little bit different. It's not going to be a standard post. So what I'd recommend doing for your YouTube one is that you'd actually come up with a storyboard. So you get yourself a blank sheet of paper and draw yourself a grid of boxes, and then actually plan a storyboard for what your video would look like for YouTube. So if we jump past YouTube, because that's going to be quite detailed and we haven't really got time to go into detail for that, let's have a look at the other 2 that we've got left. So we've got LinkedIn and we've got our Twitter one. If we look at Twitter first, so first of all, we need our profile picture. So I think personally that I would probably go for a profile picture that's based on my logo. I don't know what Elle thinks. Would you go for the logo for your profile picture?
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially because we've worked so hard on our logos, I think that's what I would go for. If you've got a particular motif, so for example, mine would use the earth and the cursor, you could perhaps use that, but some either the text logo or the image that you've created to kind of go with it, something like that, definitely.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking as well. So you'd have your standard logo for the profile picture, and then you'd probably use that across all of the platforms. So you'd have the same profile picture, so that when people see it straight away, it's your brand identity. They know who you are. They recognise it as being Planet Simulator. For Twitter, your profile name is a big part of posting. So that's something that you need to have a little bit of a think about. So you want something that says who you are. So again, I think I'd probably keep this as Planet Simulator, would probably be the most appropriate profile name for our tweets. Would you agree with that, Elle?
Yeah, definitely. It's the main thing is to avoid kind of any numbers on the end. So, you wouldn't, I don't know how many letters Planet Simulator is actually. I'm just going to quickly count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's exactly right. So hopefully you can get exactly Planet Simulator because you have 15 characters. But if you don't manage to get it, you want to kind of avoid putting numbers on the end or underscores or anything like that, because it makes it look a little bit messy. So you have to really try and think of something that's just words, no numbers or different characters, so it looks a little bit more professional.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose you could potentially end up with like maybe Planet Sim if you wanted to make it a bit shorter. So there's definitely sort of you could get away with making things a little bit shorter if you needed to. So then you get your tweet itself. So we've talked about this already. So I really like the idea of doing a poll and then having an image to really illustrate that poll. So we've already talked about the tweet itself in terms of we'd have that poll. We'd probably include some hashtags in this. So probably something around the concept of sustainability, so that probably would be one of our hashtags. I don't know if you've got any other ideas of what hashtags would work really well in this campaign.
I guess I would also include any kind of gaming hashtags. So kind of look through and see other brands who are doing either reaching the kind of audience you also want to reach, or they're making the kind of game that you feel is similar to yours. So lots of simulator games. I'd look at things like kind of Theme Hospital or The Sims or Civilization, games like that involve people kind of creating a world and experimenting within it, and kind of see what they're doing, see if they're using hashtags, and if they are and they're not specific to that game, you can totally steal them for your posts as well.
Yeah, definitely. And look for what's trending. So if there's something that's trending that fits in with the campaign that you're running, then obviously include that. If it's completely irrelevant, and don't use it, but if it fits in with what your campaign's about, then definitely include it. And then the image, it needs to be eye-catching. So I think maybe something, some gameplay from the game might be appropriate, or it might be something around the post that you're so the poll that you're including to illustrate what you are asking your readers to tell you about. So I think that covers Twitter. So obviously you could, it all depends on what you want to go for, but really make sure you include those hashtags. Think about an image that's eye-catching, and I really love the idea of using a poll on Twitter. I think that's a really great idea, especially for engaging people in getting to think about how you can make things more sustainable. So if we move over onto LinkedIn, so straight away we can see we've got the profile picture again. So we're going to repeat the profile picture. We're going to use the Planet Simulator logo. Profile name again, we're going to keep that the same, so Planet Simulator again. But we can have a profile description. So we could put a bit of detail in about what the game is and what it stands for, and probably going back to when Elle talked us through right at the very beginning about Planet Simulator and sort of the ideas behind it. We could actually have a little blurb around that as our description for the profile. I think that would fit really nicely. Then the post itself, again, we want to keep it fairly short. So this might be an opportunity to maybe pinpoint one of those particular areas. So maybe the idea of being carbon neutral, and the image that could go with it is the one where we've got our image of the finished packaging. So it might be something like this, and then the idea that you'd only need 14 people to go meat free for the year to be carbon neutral on your complete run of that particular packaging. And I think that would work really nicely. And then the post would be just highlighting how you could become carbon neutral by using this particular packaging. So I think that'd be quite a nice way of getting the information out there on LinkedIn. I don't know if you wanted to add a little bit more to that, or do you think we've kind of covered everything?
No, I think I definitely think that's great. You know, that's LinkedIn is a little bit more formal. It's a little bit more business-like. So you're not trying to be quite as creative. You know, you don't need to be quite as eye-catching. It's more about, you know, whether or not the content itself is interesting, whether it's, you know, a topic that will engage people. And this definitely is. So I think, you know, there's not quite as much to it. You don't need to be quite as clever or as eye-catching as you do on other platforms, definitely.
Yeah, and I know that for big companies, the concept of trying to be as close to carbon neutral as possible is becoming more and more important. And actually, a post which is saying, you know, have you considered changing your packaging so you can become closer to carbon neutral? I think that would actually go down very well in advertising to other companies that might be interested in taking up a more sustainable packaging design. Okay, so we're almost at the end of our session today. We've got just a little bit of looking at how we could evaluate what we've done just to finish off for today. So let me just talk you through how we would do that, and then obviously we'll give some time for questions at the end if you have any questions. So the final part of our worksheet pack is the evaluation, which is Unplugged 6, and it's to check that each of your campaigns meet the needs of a great post for that platform and then give you an opportunity to make any changes necessary. So let's have a little bit of a closer look at this worksheet. So you can see this is basically a tick based evaluation. So you just need to go through each of the statements for the platforms that you've chosen and then just tick or cross to say whether or not you feel that you've met that. So we chose Twitter as one of ours. So first of all, we'd make sure that the post that we created fits within 100 to 120 characters. So it's just a tick or cross. If it's over that 120 characters, it's not going to be able to go out on Twitter, and we'd need to edit it down anyway. It needs to be written in proper sentences. People tend to respond better on Twitter if it's written in a more formal language. So that's something else that you want to make sure and just tick across to say whether you've met that one. It should encourage conversation, which I think our poll idea is definitely going to be encouraging conversation. So that's a definite tick from that one. Uses hashtags often. We've talked about that and trying to make sure that they fit with things that are trending. So that one is something that we've definitely included in our post. Any links that you might want to use should be shortened. So if we wanted to perhaps link to our YouTube videos, for example, we'd want to make sure that we use something like Owly to make our links shorter, because if you use a really long full URL, URL stands for Universal Resource Locator. If you use a full one, that's going to take up a lot of your characters that you have available. So we want to make them shorter if we can. Bright, strong images, we've definitely included that. We've thought about how we make them really visually appealing, and it has personality, which we can definitely say ours does. And then if we look at LinkedIn, we have a short post. Yep, we've definitely got a short post. We've that's something that we didn't actually think about. We didn't think about tagging specific people or companies into our post. So that's something that we could do. So we could specifically tag in other games companies that we feel would be interested in knowing about our eco-friendly packaging. So that's something that we need to add into our post. So we would go back through and add that information in. And that includes an appropriate image. So that's something that we've included in ours. So that pretty much just encapsulates the evaluation stage. So if there's anything in that you feel you haven't quite met in your campaign, then do feel free to go back over those if you haven't quite met some of those statements. Okay, so we've completed that. So we've now sorry, I beg your pardon. So there was one further task, which was just then to having created your full campaign. If you wanted to take this further, what you could do then is create a pitch to explain your social media campaign, and you could create this in some presentation software, for example, in like Google Pages if you've got that, or in PowerPoint. You could then include your strategy that you started off with, where you detailed what the purpose of your social media campaign was. You might include the post that you intend to share, and also what you hope your impact will be. So that would be the very last thing. Would be to then take everything that you've put together in today's workshop, and then create a pitch around your ideas for the social media campaign. And as always, if you do create your pitch, we'd love to see it. So do share it with us if you do get onto that very last task. Okay, so that pretty much comes to the end of the workshop. I'm just going to talk through the elements that we've covered in today's workshop. So we have covered brand identity, we've talked about carbon footprint, and we've looked quite a lot about how we can do offsetting for that as well. We've talked about considerations needed when designing environmentally friendly packaging. We've looked at audience and purpose when designing a social media campaign, and we've looked at how to create a social media campaign for a specific platform. So it pretty much comes to the end of our Eco Gamer workshop. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just go and jump onto the stream in case there's any questions coming through from anybody. And while I do that, I'll just give Elle a chance just to finish off today's workshop and just close the workshop for us, and then I'll come back just to do the final couple of words. So I'm just going to jump. I'm not just sitting here texting. I'm going to jump on my phone and just check if we've got any questions on the stream, and then if there are any questions, I'll come back to you. So Elle, over to you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I have to say, I've hugely enjoyed this. It's actually really funny when you use social media a lot, you don't kind of break it down and really think about what's involved. And when you're just getting these gaming campaigns, you don't really think about the work behind them. So I've actually really enjoyed kind of hearing a bit more about that. And I hope that you've all enjoyed kind of hearing a bit more about the Football Manager side of it, the work that they've done to create that sustainable packaging. And you've had fun kind of creating your own, because it is really exciting. It is, you know, something that we are trying to do as a games industry. So you're kind of at the forefront of it. You're actually doing what lots of people in the games industry aren't doing yet. And so if you have made your Planet Simulator packaging, if you have come up with a brilliant design for that, we've also got a competition. You can win some great prizes. So if you go to the Ukie Digital Schoolhouse or BAFTA website, if you search for Eco Gamer, this will come up, and you can find the details there, find how to email that through. So make sure, you know, if you've put hours into your fantastic cover, make sure you email that to us, because we desperately want to see them. I definitely promise I'm not going to steal it and pretend that it's mine if it's really good, but you might win some great prizes. So make sure you email that through. And of course, if this has got you really interested in the work that BAFTA does, if you want to see behind the scenes of creative industries like film and TV and games, they have a BAFTA Kids and Teens YouTube channel. So you can go there, subscribe there, check out the content. And this is my favorite one. We have the Young Game Designers competition at BAFTA. So this is a really wonderful competition. It makes me furious every year with how talented all the entrants are. We've just had our winners this year, which means you've got basically a whole year to come up with some game design. So it's for people who know how to make games. Perhaps you've got a little bit of experience using things like Twine, or perhaps you had a look at Unity, or even some of the kind of Minecraft building aspects there, Roblox as well. So if you can build games, you can make games for it. But it's also for projects like the one we've done today. So you can actually just come up with an idea for a game, or you can do some drawing to show the concept of what your game would look like. And there's actually categories for that. So you can win prizes for coming up with a good idea of a game, creating artwork for it, that kind of thing. So actually the kind of thing that we've done today here. And so that is BAFTA Young Game Designers. Definitely go and check that out. Also, if just to see the fantastic games that we've had entered before. But that's how you can get a bit more involved if you've really enjoyed what you've done today. I definitely have. So thank you so much, Estelle.
Thank you, Elle. That was really great. Just rounding up with what we've been doing, and the Young Game Designer competition is a fab competition, and there's lots of digital schoolhouse resources as well. So if you're interested in entering and you want some ideas of sort of where to start, then do have a look on our YouTube channel. There's a few workshops that will definitely be relevant to you. The part-based games workshops would be particularly good. So I've got a couple of questions actually. So the first question I beg your pardon. I actually have one question. I have a couple of people telling me how great today's session's been, so that's really lovely. Thank you so much to Becky Frost for saying how much she's enjoying it. She's just asking where the resources that we've been using and where we can find them on the website again, so she missed the beginning. So I'm just going to quick recap where to find them, because that's a great question and that's probably really important if you want to run this again at home. So I'm just going to jump onto the my browser so that I can show you where to find them. So if you are wanting to have a go at doing this yourself at home, or you want to run this at school maybe, you need to go to the Digital Schoolhouse website, which is digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. And if you go to the resources section, click on live workshops. And if you scroll down the page and find the Eco Gamer workshop, if you click on where it says Eco Gamer, that will take you straight to the workshop page. and you'll find all the resources for the workshop we've run today at the bottom in the public files section. So there's the lesson presentation, which myself and Elle have been running through, the worksheets that we've been using throughout the workshop, the unplugged activity if you wanted to have a go at designing your own packaging net for your own version of Planet Simulator. There's details there about how to print them off as well. There's the game design document, which goes through Planet Simulator and sort of the ideas behind the game itself to help you with designing your packaging and also your social media campaign. There's the social media strategy workbook for Hootsuite, which we were referring to for getting ideas of what kind of information we need to post, and also the sustainable packaging information that Sega have included about Football Manager for helping to illustrate why it's such an important change to make, and really why it's a possible change for lots of companies to be doing in the future. So I think that's pretty much answered any questions. There we go. Yeah, sorry Becky, I didn't mean to call you out for missing the start. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do appreciate having you joining us today for our stream. So that pretty much closes the workshop for today. I just do one more check just to make sure I haven't missed anybody. No, that's everything. Okay, so thank you so much for taking part today. We hope that you've had fun and learnt something new. If you've enjoyed this workshop, check out our YouTube channel for more follow-along activities. If you have any questions or feedback for me, please email dsh@ukie.org.uk. And as I said earlier, we'd love to see you learning computing at home with Digital Schoolhouse. So parents and guardians, please feel free to share any images or videos using the hashtag computing@home on Twitter or on Facebook. Also, for those of you who love writing, Digital Schoolhouse have launched a creative writing competition, which you can find out more information about on our website. And if you're the parent of a primary aged pupil, and you're interested in finding out about Digital Schoolhouse and how we can work with your child's school, you can find out more information about our programme on our website, digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. You can find our contact information in the section below or at the end of this video. Lastly, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Elle Osili-Wood for joining us today, and I'll just pass on to her so she can just close her and say her thanks as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, as I said before, that was absolutely fantastic. I feel like I could listen to you all day. You have a really lovely voice. It's very nice to listen to you just talk through everything, very in command and in control. I love it. So I really, really enjoyed it. But as I said, I hope you all enjoyed it at home. It's actually really fun to get to participate in a workshop and do it as well, rather than just present it. So I've actually really enjoyed kind of sitting and imagining, how I would market my very own game. And as we said, there's loads of ways to get involved. If you Google Eco Gamer, you can find all the links to kind of Digital Schoolhouse, BAFTA, Ukie, and you can kind of continue this on. This isn't the end today. Don't worry, this isn't goodbye. We've got lots more projects, lots more ways you can get involved. And as we said, if you do, please do send them to us. Use that hashtag, email us. We just want to see the work that you've done. I want to see if it's better than mine. That's basically why I'm saying this. But thank you so much. I've hugely enjoyed today, and I hope that you guys have too.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elle, again for joining us today. It's been a real fun workshop, and it's been lovely to have somebody else to bounce ideas off today. So thank you again for joining me for today's workshop. So that's it for this season of our live workshops. We are going to go on a summer break now. So I really do look forward to seeing you next time. And that is a goodbye from Digital Schoolhouse for the summer holidays. Thank you very much.